For me, just to start off with retirement and move into that, because that's going to lead into what I really want to say. For me, retirement is a shift to a different phase in activism, and you know, it's no less active, it's different. Because what I want to do, and you know, in so many ways, is to shift from decision making, both everyday and strategic, because of the incredible number of decisions that staff has to make on Interfaith Peace-Builders. You know, those of you who've been on delegations, you know about a lot of them. Well, multiply that by 10 at least for what we do in the office, and we hope you never even know about half the decisions you make, you know, because they're related to security, they're related to all sorts of things that we try to clear out of the way for you. I want to get away from that. I want to move to advising and supporting the staff that is doing that kind of work. And I want and am looking forward to the flexibility and creativity and relearning how to write, because out of 10 years of Interfaith Peace-Builders and 5 years of all too much administration at Guilford before that, you know, there's nothing like, you know, report writing and program descriptions and program reports to absolutely kill your writing ability. So I want to really write, and I need to relearn that, and I'm looking forward to it. And I'm still going to be engaged with Interfaith Peace-Builders, as Mike indicated. And I'm particularly going to be focusing on follow-up work. So for better or worse, you may be hearing more from me, not less. Retirement has made me move to reflecting on several things. And the combination I want to focus on tonight is generations, community, and resistance. And generations, obviously, you know, when you make a transition like that, like this, you start thinking about generations. And the plural there is very deliberate, and not just, you know, my generation and the younger generation, because between me and Selma, there are lots of generations, especially with the way change, the speed of change currently. I've been thinking about, you know, my generation and its role in organizations like Interfaith Peace-Builders and movements of social change. And my generation, to be slightly more specific, is the era of the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, the feminist movement. And I think it's time, well, we already are talking about legacies in a lot of ways. For me, it's really time to be thinking about legacies. And when we have talked about legacies, we tend to emphasize history, heroes, sometimes heroines, but not nearly enough, movements, strategies and tactics in relation to nonviolence. And this year's African Heritage Delegation and its partner youth delegation reminded me of another piece of our legacy that gets less emphasis, and as far as I'm concerned, too little emphasis, which is community. And both before and after this delegation, you know, it was one of the things that really touched me and reinvigorated me in terms of thinking about change is the way that Avery and Carolyn, both in the lead-up and the follow-up, talked about community in relation to how the African Heritage Delegation related to their constituencies. And when Gerald Lenore, who was the African Heritage Delegation leader, came back, you know, one of the first things that Gerald said when I met him at the airport was, our delegation was a community. We spoke and we acted as a community out of the shared knowledge that we came into this trip with.
Absolutely.
The first time.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I've heard members of the youth delegation that went at the same time as the African Heritage Delegation say, say that learning from the collective wisdom of the African Heritage Delegation was a highlight of the trip for them. So that speaking with a communal voice to other people on the trip was crucial. And community, building communities, organizing around communities is part of my generational legacy. And I think it's crucial to the way that Interfaith Peace-Builders needs to think and that we can think about work in Israel-Palestine. So I want to dig a little bit deeper tonight and think about some about Interfaith Peace-Builders and communities. And I am, so glad that Carolyn and Selma led off, because they laid the groundwork in what they said for what I want to do. They covered the stuff about the occupation, the stuff about personal transformation, and I want to go somewhere else. So this is a really great, as far as I'm concerned, set of three people together. Community in and of itself is a vague and one of those loosey-goosey terms that can mean about anything you want to. But what I mean when I'm talking about community tonight is what Sharon Welch, one of my favorite feminist liberation theologians, calls communities of resistance and solidarity. By luck, grace, good fortune, whatever you want to call it, I've been part of and worked in varied forms of community resistance communities of resistance most of my adult life. From the time that I graduated from college, when I went to Iraq to teach school, our United Mission in Iraq had the difficult circumstances of, in the last year of my work, resisting deportation. 6 orders of deportation, and witnessing state terrorism under the first year of Saddam Hussein's Ba'ath regime. I learned what it meant to be in a community of 20 or 30 people who are struggling to figure, how do we resist? When do we decide that we are causing more harm than good? From that to helping build an anti-war community at Louisville Theological Seminary, Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. And from there to the Guilford College Quaker community, where we struggled, and I'm not sure we ever successfully answered, how you teach resistance in an academically responsible way, and how far you go with students, how far you don't go with students. And if you want to know success or not of it, ask Hannah after dinner, because Hannah's one of my Guilford students. And while at Guilford, becoming involved in the racial and economic justice community in Greensboro, North Carolina. And while they're still getting involved in the Palestinian nonviolent resistance movement, because I got involved back in 1984 when I first met Mubarak Awad, and we started working together on Palestinian nonviolence. Right, and actually right now, Mubarak couldn't be here tonight because of another dinner he had to go to. But Mubarak's my teaching partner at American University now in nonviolent resistance. So I've been really lucky to be involved with communities of resistance. What I want to do right now is actually a brief riff, not on Palestinians, but on Greensboro, because I want to give you some sense of what I see as the importance and potential of communities of resistance, and to start to build some of the links that I see between these communities in the U.S. and Israel-Palestine. November 3rd, 1979, about a year after I moved to Greensboro, at a Death to the Klan rally organized by the Communist Workers' Party, a convoy of Klansmen drove up, pulled out guns, opened fire, killing 5 Communist Worker Party leaders, and wounding 13 other people. In Greensboro, the heart of the sit-in movement, in the heart of the black community, the city was stunned, the activist community most of all. Before the funeral for the people who were killed, we had a meeting. One of the most contentious meetings I've ever been in. It was the activist community, the Communist Workers' Party survivors, and close advisors that came in from other places. And in the meeting, from the Communist Workers' survivors, pain, anger, regret, belligerence, militancy, posturing, wild accusations about government conspiracies, many of which ended up proving true over a course of 5 years. From many of the Greensboro activists present, defensiveness. You provoked the Klan. You're communist. How dare you speak to me like that? You're violent. We're peacemakers. And stone-faced silence. At a crucial point in the meeting, Anne Braden, one of the great unrecognized heroines of the civil rights movement, got up and said, "We can't afford this. It's the Klan that's coming back. We have to resolve this. We have to cooperate." And at the end of the meeting, a lot of people walked out, said, "We can't do it." A lot of ministers walked out, white and black. The white liberals walked out. The union activists walked out. The civic-minded walked out. The NAACP walked out. Some stayed. The veteran leadership of the civil rights, of the sit-in movement, the Communist Worker Party survivors, some ministers, black and white, young African-American activists, Quakers, some of us academic-based activists. We just had to say, it's too important. We have to stay. We have to deal with this. So we stayed at the table. And we organized around 3 trials of the Klansmen, 2 trials for murder in which they were acquitted, and a civil trial where they were found guilty, and organized regionally in a fight back against the Klan. And as we talked and organized, we argued, and we fought, and we struggled among ourselves as much as we were engaged in the struggle outside. Because we had to work through the pain, the grief, the anger, the loss that the murders had caused, and to channel all of that into action. We became a community of resistance and solidarity. And we were anchored in nonviolence. Although the CWP members originally had started out from a point of violence. That community has morphed and changed over the years and has gone through a lot of different names. Now, and for the longest period of time, the beloved community center. But from the beginning and still, it remains grounded in the 1960s sit-in movement, with leaders from that movement still active 50 years later. And it's a community of resistance transformed and deepened by that response to the 1979 Klan murders. A community that continually draws in new and younger members to its changing work. And now is working with Latino gangs, which is one of the current problems in Greensboro, with one of the gang leaders announcing that he is now a nonviolent activist and surviving an assassination attempt for his move to nonviolence. This community of resistance, like most communities, is small. We never had more than 100 core members, probably more like 20 to 50 people who really knew what in the world we were doing. Always inviting people in, but yeah, we're talking small. But small, as a small community, this community challenged and transformed a city. From defeating the Klan, eventually in trials, but more importantly, bankrupting Klan groups through legal action throughout the Southeast, to changing the Greensboro electoral system, to electing the first woman mayor and then the first African-American woman mayor, to the first successful unionizing in the nation at Kmart, to forming the first Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the U.S. This is the power of a community of resistance. Why this story? First, because I'm not sure how widespread people's experience with such communities is now in the U.S. Activism is quieter. Many people in the U.S. and people connected with Interfaith Peace-Builders have participated in such communities, and for those of us who have, these reminders and memories are worthwhile. The second reason is because when an Interfaith Peace-Builders delegation steps into Israel-Palestine, steps through the opening that that delegation creates, they step in, they meet similar communities of resistance and solidarity. Bil'in, Nil'in, Jenin, Al-Walaja, Dahesha, Dahars, Holy Land Trust, WEAM, ICAD, New Profile, One Voice, Boycott from Within, Anarchist Against the Wall, I could keep going. Village by village, organization by organization, communities of resistance have emerged in Palestine and in Israel. Many Interfaith Peace-Builders delegates can see and begin to understand the power of these communities that they're drawn, and they are drawn to them. It's a key to how IFPB delegates connect to ongoing work with Palestinians and Israelis. And in so doing, they get drawn into these communities as part of the solidarity piece of communities of resistance and solidarity. And for some delegates who have been parts of such communities before, in the US or elsewhere, it's a wonderful experience of saying, I know these people. I'm at home. We're part of the same network, even though we have just met. For me, knowing these communities of resistance and supporting and engaging them is the deeper level and most important work of Interfaith Peace-Builders. Because this is where the work of nonviolent resistance among Palestinians and Israelis and others is real and vital. It's not nonviolence just learned because you're part of a religious tradition, or in a classroom, or in a political conversation. It's nonviolence born at the edge, where individuals and community come at it from the experience of loss, of freedom, of life, of land, and they choose nonviolence, and the nonviolence has an edge. It's important because this may well be the first time that a delegate on one of our trips has encountered nonviolence at this level. It can be transformational. And even for those of us who do know such types of nonviolence, we can and do deepen our own understanding and practice. It's important because they can help us recognize similar communities here in the US. Sometimes you need to go away before you can see what is in front of your eyes. Communities of resistance and solidarity are frequently less visible here in the US. But they are here. They're present, and they are available. We hope that our delegates can connect to these communities here, or start their own here, which some delegates have. As staff, we do what we can to enable this work. What's made building this understanding of the deep work of nonviolent resistance into IFPB delegations possible is our ability repeatedly to find young staff and interns who have deep connections and deep relationships with some, frequently many, of these communities. Gretchen, from her experience living in Palestine, brought an incredible depth of knowledge, depth of experience to, at the beginning of our program, to set the tone, and as Mike said, and I have it written down here, so same word, lay the foundation. Mike and Jake Pace, who's in California, and Emily have built on that foundation. And in retiring, I'm leaving Interfaith Peace-Builders with an experienced board, which I haven't even gotten around to mentioning, and the hands of not just a young staff, but staff who have the experience and commitment and ability to build the program. That feels good. In my generation, it's time to pass on the knowledge about these communities. Pass on the knowledge of how to build and sustain them practically. Work in helping to connect the Palestinian-Israeli struggle with other struggles here in this country. To continue to support the communities here as well as there, not just with our knowledge, but with continuing work, with money that we can provide, so that new generations can continue the community work, not just the peace work, but the community work. And in return, new generations need to make the deep and long-term commitment that communities of resistance require. It's not easy. And they need to build and sustain and connect those communities focused on Palestine and Israel here in the U.S. because the network of local activism and even national activism on this issue is unconnected. We are unsuccessful in changing the situation because we are disconnected from each other. And we need to remedy that, and I think the real remedying is up to people younger than I am. And we need to carry the work forward into new generations, future generations. Young generations need to carry that work forward. Because a struggle like this, it's not a one-generation thing. And one of the things I really like about, the group of you here together tonight is that you know a hell of a lot of this. And you are part of these communities. I'm naming something, talking about something that a lot of you know about. FOR gave us, FOR is our parent organization, and in a lot of struggle helped create Interfaith Peace-Builders as what it is. Nonviolence International, Michael and Mubarak, gave us a free office, a free phone, support for 5 years. And that's the kind of thing, that you do in these communities. The Way to Jerusalem Mission Group helped support an African American delegation that raised the understanding of community and the power of community to a different level within Interfaith Peace-Builders. The Open Door community that Hannah's parents were founders of. I visited the Open Door in February. One of the staff members that I was really looking forward to meeting was over in Israel, Palestine, doing organizing. Open Door community deals with homeless people and the death penalty. They had a staff member on her own volition, but as part of the community in Israel and Palestine. And for those of you who have been involved with the Troy Davis issue recently, Troy's execution, Hannah's parents, Ed and Murphy, were working with Troy since the early 1990s. The connections are here, and they need to grow. Interfaith Peace-Builders plays a really sort of strange role in all of this, because we aren't a community of resistance. Our network is fabulous, but we're far too loosely organized and scattered to have the kind of personal contact to really hold and support each other physically, because that's what you need when you're dealing with nonviolence at the level of real resistance and loss. You know, we don't have that. And that's a deliberate organizational decision, because we see our role instead as opening doors for our delegations. When I was in Israel-Palestine during the first Intifada, if you went into a refugee camp, if you went in through the main gate, the gate was shut unless you had an Israeli permission slip, which meant it was shut. So all of our delegations, everybody I knew, you know, not Interfaith Peace-Builders, this was prior to Interfaith Peace-Builders, our delegations went around to the side of the refugee camp, and somebody would meet us outside the wall and, you know, pull this doorway open into Dheisheh camp or Balata camp or C camp. You know, pull this piece of wire aside, and we would all scramble through. That's the kind of door that Interfaith Peace-Builders offers. It ain't the main gate. And you hit the people who are doing the work right away. That's who we are. That's what we try to do. You're supporting it. I hope you'll continue to. I'm proud to be part of it and to be one of the builders. Thanks.